I don't know if this is good or bad. Let's talk about it.
We've got to be prepared. Those words coming from the Maryland State Superintendent of Schools after a bill has now been introduced in Washington to abolish the U.S. Department of Education. Project Baltimore's Chris Papps asked Dr. Carrie Wright to.
A bill has been presented to get rid of the Department of Education. On its face, I think most people would be like, man, that's a terrible idea to get rid of the Department of Education. But don't make a decision yet. Let's go ahead and play the rest of the video and then we're going to talk about it. Because I think it's a good point in this video. I think it's some things they didn't think of that are bad points. But let's watch this video and figure out if abolishing the Department of Education is something that one could be done, and two, would it actually be effective?
About the legislation to see how it could affect Maryland.
And as you have seen in the news,
Dr. Carrie Wright has been Maryland State Superintendent of Schools for about a year. And with the election of Donald Trump, a lot could soon change.
Just a quick question about the DOE, the US DOE.
A bill has formally been introduced in Washington, D.C. to shut down the U.S. Department of Education.
And what are your concerns, if any, moving forward with the proposal to abolish the DOE?
so no, I've not looked at the bill. I think that what we're trying to keep our eyes on, obviously, is the funding aspect of it.
And I'm going to close the Department of Education and move education back to the states. And we're going to do it fast.
During the 2024 campaign, President-elect Trump ran on a platform that included abolishing the DOE, but did not provide many details. Now, we're getting a better idea of what a DOE shutdown may look like. Senator Mike Rounds, a Republican from South Dakota, has introduced legislation that, if passed, would move many DOE functions to other federal agencies. Rounds says the bill would save taxpayer money on administrative costs, while limiting what he describes as regulatory overreach. According to the bill, federal programs that help students with disabilities would move to the Department of Health and Human Services. The DOE's Civil Rights Division would move to the Department of Justice, while student loan, research, and data collection would be taken over by the Treasury Department.
We're prepared to be partners with whoever we need to be partners with.
For Dr. Wright, the agency overseeing the programs doesn't seem to matter. What does matter is that Maryland students receive the services they need. And according to the bill, it appears many of those student services are not being removed.
If they've assigned something to HHS versus USDOE, then I'll be a partner with HHS. I mean, it's whoever I need to be the partner with in order to get the work done.
The U.S. Department of Education was created by Congress in 1979. This year, most of its $238 billion budget will go to student aid programs for colleges. The rest is largely distributed to the states to fund schools in high poverty areas and to educate students with disabilities. In Maryland, about 7% of all public K through 12 education dollars come from the federal government. That funding is Dr. Wright's biggest concern.
I think that we've got to be prepared if those funds get reduced in any way.
Wright did not explain what those preparations may look like, but she says curriculum and instruction is already largely handled on a state level. The federal government has little involvement. But if funding is affected by abolishing the DOE, she says that could have a significant impact on the services students receive.
Yeah, that's what we have to have.
President-elect Trump will be sworn in on January 20th, 2025. He has already nominated his former head of the Small Business Administration, Linda McMahon, to be the next and potentially last DOE secretary. Shutting down the U.S. Department of Education will require congressional approval. It's not guaranteed to happen, and lawmakers have not yet debated the bill. But Dr. Wright says no matter what does happen, Maryland will adapt.
We are still continuing to do our work here and focus on the students here and focus on what we can do to improve instruction across the state. And that will always be my first focus. And then we'll wait and see what plays out in DC.
I'm Chris Pabst, and this.
All right, so let me know what y'all think. Department of Education being up out of there. One, I think it's going to be very, very difficult to actually happen. I guess one of the reasons why, hey, shout out to the new Secretary of Education, Linda McMahon. But I don't know if y'all familiar with this. I know y'all hear Linda McMahon and y'all probably think the Vince McMahon, the wrestling guy's wife, but she actually held a similar role at the state level for a substantial amount of time. She actually has some experience in a similar role. So she's not foreign to educational needs at the state level and what it takes to run the administrative rigors of the Department of Education. She does have some experience in that. I think that one, she's probably not the worst pick. I think she's probably better than his previous pick that she had, who was very pro private school and charter school. But I think it's going to be very difficult to do. I think that one, Congress is probably not going to sign off on it. Even if they have control, I think it could cause to pause from some person signing off on it. Two, I don't think the person he put in that position is necessarily a yes person that would just do it as a matter of course. Now, this was the actual dope question right here because this was, my initial concern. I was like, wait, if they get rid of this, are they getting rid of all of the funding that goes to the programs for IEP students and students with cognitive and developmental disabilities? If the plan is to move services from the Department of Education, get rid of that to places where they belong, what was said in the video makes sense. When you talk about student loans, funding issues, the Department of Treasury does seem well prepared to handle those things. The Department of Health and Human Services would seem like an appropriate place to handle things when you're dealing with special needs and things like that for students to make sure they have access to programs. So I actually think that's actually kind of smart. And I agree with the representative from Maryland, what she said in that video. We don't care what government agency we got to go to make sure shit happen, long as it can happen. I think the thing that they're missing for me, and you all let me know, is I don't think the savings on administrative costs that they think they'll get, they will actually receive. That's what I think that's being missing from here. Let me see. I do know that Biden Harris has let our military go to hell. I'm a BDU era, same here. BDU era here, same here, family. And seeing the stuff going on now is abhorrent compared to the way I'm used to NCOs and officers acting like clowns on social media. I don't disagree with that. Did you see the bill that was proposed? I generally don't disagree with that. There's actually a bill being proposed now. I was talking to someone at my job who's in the reserves about it, where they have, I think everyone else in the military, if I'm not mistaken, is getting a 4.7% pay raise, but E1 through E4, if I'm not mistaken, it might be E5. It may be E1 through E4, but they're looking at like a 14% pay raise because, if you're E1 and through E4, I was a E2, I think, or E3 I started at or something like that, and you don't make shit. So they're trying to get the lowest level of the enlisted branch the biggest raise, and it was something like a 14.45% raise for E1 through E4, I believe. It might have been E5 in there, but I know for sure E1 through E4, and then everybody else will get the 4.7% that's across the board. I don't know. I'm not opposed to doing something different. I think that it just has to be planned. I'm not a fan of trying to do something different with no plan on how to change it or how to carry it out, just doing it because you say you want to do it. So I think that it makes sense. If you get rid of the Department of Education, you want to allocate the responsibilities of the DOE to other agencies. Department of Justice handling litigation on behalf of the Department of Education, it makes sense to me. But I don't think if the point is to save money, that's absolutely not going to happen because they aren't going to save on administrative costs. Usually, kids with the IEP ain't going to need student loans; they need services now, not later. But yeah, and that's the point. The same thing that the lady said who was speaking on Maryland's interest. She doesn't, as long as the funding and the services don't get cut, she doesn't care what branch of government she has to go to get it. So I think that that's actually a plan that has legs to stand on. If we get rid of the Department of Education, how can we bifurcate all of the duties that the Department of Education have to other agencies who should be well prepared to do it? I think that's a good part of the plan. I think it's not, if the goal is to cut funding and save money on administrative costs, I just don't think that's going to happen. So that's where I think the plan fails. I think bifurcating, splitting the duties up could be a smart route to go. But when you give all of these additional duties to HHS, when you give all of these additional duties to the Department of Treasury, to the Department of Justice, come on in. I know, I know. They coming to get me. I'll be down. What time is it? Okay, I'll be down. Do me a favor. Can you go down there and get me some of that wine we just got from our club membership today? It's in the refrigerator. There's the only glass of wine that's in there. Yeah, no, the big one. Give me a cool glass too. Don't bring a red cup. All right. I know I'm from the hood, but I got some class. All right, yeah. And so I don't know. I think I don't think the services would be interrupted from a technical standpoint. From a functional standpoint, yes. Because if the goal is to save money on administrative costs, that won't happen. Because when you take a big block of duties from one agency and pass them to another agency, their staff are not going to be able to handle that load of new duties. So it's going to stop people from getting resources they need because they're going to have to, all they're going to do is all the employees who are over here doing it at the Department of Education, they would literally need to move those employees over to Health and Human Services because they already understand the program. They already know how it should operate. Then you have to waste resources and money making sure HHS has the infrastructure and the capacity to handle that new obligation. So I think it was a smart idea. And okay, we can move these duties around to other agencies, but it's no way it's going to save any money on administrative costs. Starting up something, stopping something, and starting it back up is an absolute nightmare. The same way, even when the government shuts down, everybody think, oh man, a government shutdown is easy. A government shutdown, less problematic. Cranking everything back up to get everything rolling after people haven't been doing it is a big problem. So I think that's where that plan fails. So I don't think it should pass. I would be shocked if it did. I just don't see 4 years are going to go by. I don't think they're going to get rid of a government agency that's been around since 1979.